Alrighty, thank you so much, Jeffrey. Next, we have Dr. Ahlam Rahal teaching us about postcolonial techniques of control, melting the consciousness. I really like that title. And this is our second last speaker of the day. And also we have that bag of some warm jackets and like some dry stuff if you're getting really cold. Please feel free to take that. We also have art sellers over there selling arts, crafts, magnets, and all good things. And the proceeds will be going towards Gaza and I believe Sudan as well. And then we have free snacks. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Yeah, Okay, hello everyone. Do you hear me well? Okay, so I know some faces because I also spoke about Palestine in other events. So welcome back. My name is Ahlam Rahal. I'm an assistant professor at Acadia University in the School of Education and in the counseling unit, newly formed unit. And I am Palestinian myself. I was born and raised in Palestine. Lived my entire life until I moved to Canada to pursue my PhD studies. So what I will be talking about today is about postcolonialism, postcolonial techniques of control, and melting consciousness. What we mean by melting consciousness. So I will not be talking about what you maybe have seen on through social media or news, but what is maybe hidden there from the surface and how this could be dangerous and how this could be used to control Palestinians. So before I start, how many of you visited Palestine just by raising your hand? 1, 2, 2. Okay, so if you have not yet, you are invited. Of course, you should take care of yourself, but it's a nice place to visit, and it's also could open your mind about living there and what does it mean to be there, to live in Palestine. As I mentioned before, I will not be only talking about what you see in the media, and in my opinion, this is problematic because the picture is deeper and the techniques of dominating Palestine are even more sophisticated than using military forces. So a quick background about why I'm thinking about postcolonial techniques, and I started thinking about that and talking about the danger of controlling Palestinians through sophisticated techniques. It's from my background. I am counseling therapist, and before I moved to Canada, I was also a counselor, school counselor in Palestinian schools. And I noticed that during my work there, I noticed that mental health intersects with the political environment. So I noticed gaps between what you mentioned before, Jeffrey, about depoliticizing institutions, education, psychiatry, psychology, mental health, and seeing in reality that these are not really neutral, or mental health needs of people, they are not neutral, they are impacted by the environment. So one of the problems... Thank you. I was happy at the beginning. I thought that, oh, it's clear now and would be easier to talk. Okay, so what I noticed is that many of the factors in society and the lived experiences of Palestinians were not there in our training during counseling and therapy. And I'm saying this, that even though I am Palestinian, but still we are impacted, Palestinian people and Palestinian professionals, we are impacted directly and indirectly by imperialism, where even materials and curriculum of counseling and therapy, we borrow them, unfortunately, from the US, from Western Europe, where they don't talk about what's going on in Palestine and how impoverishment and how stealing lands, killing people, murdering people, poverty, prison, how this can also impact the well-being of individuals. Now, connecting this also to here, to Canada, to indigenous people, also African Nova Scotians, we also noticed this gap in training people to become teachers, to become nurses, to become psychiatrists or psychologists, whereas in reality we ignore also other social factors that can also impact the well-being of individuals. On one occasion, also during my work as a school counselor with high school students, I was shocked once, and maybe this was one of the turning points for me to think about the politics or sophisticated techniques of control, when one of my students told me that he was hoping that after graduating from high school to become a policeman and to join the Israeli institution of police. Now, this student, he's Palestinian and he's Arab, but this was shocking to me because when I think about this through psychology and psychiatry, we are aware of the phenomenon of the colonized when they identify with their oppressor. Now, this happens in Palestine. Yes, this is not, I can't say that this is the majority, but this is there. And we learned also about this from Frantz Fanon, when he also talks about how the colonized, they start behaving or speaking like also their colonizer. So when my student told me, I thought or I believe that I want to become a policeman and to join the Israeli police because I will be more secure, financially more secure. So it was a sign for me that he identifies with the oppressor and he's getting alienated from his culture and his background. So moving on from this point, I want to discuss with you and share with you some examples of how occupation is so powerful in pervading the identity of Palestinians and shaping their consciousness. And that's why also the title for this presentation is Melting the Consciousness. So I will not be talking about using the military forces that we all see in the social media, but I will talk about these soft techniques that are used to change the identity and to make Palestinians assimilated with the Israeli or with the oppressors. Because as we learned, not only from Israel, but also from other countries that colonized others, in order for them to continue colonizing them and controlling them, they had to make these colonized people similar to the colonizer. So in order for us to control others, maybe we cannot continue using forces, but we can change their culture and they can become like us. So what the Israeli government has done in order to make Palestinians, or try to make Palestinians more controlled and disciplined. I want to first start talking about what we mean by post-colonialism. And just to correct some mistaken information, some people think that when we say post-colonialism, we talk about the era of after colonization, as if we don't have colonization anymore. But no, post-colonialism is not about an era. It's about another form of controlling people with very hidden tools of domination. So when we talk about colonization, it's the use of military and political domination against some countries, as we know from the history about France colonizing Algeria, for example, and Morocco, Britain colonizing India and Egypt, and by the way, under very nice words, and we should be also aware of using these words such as protection. And the UK was protecting India and protecting Egypt. So using these nice words of protection, there were actually colonization. So colonization is using the military forces, but when these countries notice that, well, they are not really benefiting because there is resistance, so they thought about making the colonized similar to them, and here's the period or era of post-colonization where there are new forms of colonization. So, speaking of these techniques of control, post-colonial techniques of control, I want to also give the credit to Walid Dakka, and from whom I was inspired in thinking about the concept of melting the consciousness. And mainly because this war, we heard a lot about prisoners and hostages. Personally speaking, I am against any forms of putting people in prison. So I'm not happy with seeing hostages. I'm not happy with seeing also prisoners there in Israeli jails. But I want to also talk about the experience of Walid Dakka. He is Palestinian. And he's Palestinian political prisoner who spent 38, even more than 38 years in an Israeli prison. Rarely the media talked about him. They were focusing here, unfortunately, they were focusing on hostages, but they did not talk a lot about Palestinian prisoners who spent the majority or their entire life in the prison, and even after ending their sentences, they had to stay in the prison. So Israel did not allow to release Walid Dakka, for example, even after he finished his sentence and even after he got cancer. So Walid Dakka is a political prisoner who spent 38 years in an Israeli prison. He wrote a book that's titled Sahr al-Wa'i, Melting the Consciousness. And in his book, he reflects on his and his fellow inmates' experiences of incarceration. Walid Dakka's opinion about melting consciousness, he says that after the first intifada means uprising in Arabic, that happened in the late 80s, Israel deployed advanced social psychological techniques such as fragmentation and ignorance policies among the Palestinian prisoners in order to increase the control over prisoners, targeting their identities, not their bodies. And here the problem, and here's the danger of this, targeting their identities and targeting their consciousness as well as social, as well as their social roles as liberation agents. Because political prisoners, they have also representation and strong image in Palestinian society, so the Israeli government, they did not only target their body by only putting them in the prison, but also shaping and reshaping their consciousness and identities so that they stop thinking, or the Israeli government was trying to make them stop thinking about liberation or liberating Palestine. Now, the important point here from this reflection in Walid Dakka's analysis is that Israel took these techniques of manipulation and targeting the subjectivities of Palestinian prisoners and expanded these techniques to the wider society in Palestine, making Palestinians trying to make all citizens in Palestine as inmates in their wider society. Now, some examples of what is done in the wider society who Israel tries to make them inmates in wider society. So one, fragmentation, not the prison, fragmentation, the wider prison society itself. First of all, from 1948 and later also in 1967 when Israel occupied the West Bank, Israel divided the Palestinians into different regions. So we have Palestinians who live in the north, there are Palestinians who live in the West Bank, and Palestinians who live in Gaza. So if in the future you will have the chance to go there, you will see that there will be checkpoints between these regions, and you will see that people might not have the chance to go to visit their family members in other regions. So for example, I come from the north, I am Palestinian from the north, and some of my extended family members, before the war in 1948, they stayed and they resided in the West Bank. And because of the fragmentation and segregation between the regions, they are not able to come to visit us in the north, but we are able to go to visit them in the West Bank. Now, what does it mean? And I don't have time to go into details. It's that alongside the fragmentation that Israel does in dividing Palestine into regions, they also give some Palestinians privilege and incentives. So if you live in the north, for example, you will be able to travel to the West Bank, but if you live in the West Bank, you will not be able, or it's so difficult for you to go and visit your family members in the north. So it's kind of also another softer technique of controlling people. However, if you really insist that you live in the West Bank, but you want to visit your family members in the north, like in our case, you can apply for a permit, for a visit permit, and it's relatively expensive. So this is another way of controlling Palestinians. Now, segregation, fragmentation, and we have also the other region, Gaza. So it's so difficult. We cannot, people who live in the north or people who live also in the West Bank, we cannot go to Gaza to visit them. So it becomes more difficult for us also to unite and to reorganize. And as you notice also from the policy of demonstrations, for example, so when they try to individualize students or when they try to make them avoid getting organized, it's also another way of controlling them. Speaking also of divisions and segregation, I don't know how many of you also is aware about dividing the West Bank itself by Zone A, Zone B, Zone C. So also checkpoints between them. Sometimes marriage is also difficult. I will also come to this point where we can see that occupation pervades not only identities, or they try to pervade consciousness, but also shaping or controlling social relations between people. Now, speaking of trying to control the social relations, another law, and Jeffrey, maybe again I go back to you about policy and policies and laws they are creating, under the idea of having justice or supporting people or organizing a better life, but actually in many situations policies are put there to protect those who are in power. So another law that occupies Palestinians, it's the family unification law. So if you live in the north, like some people, some Palestinians, like my family, and if you are married to someone from the West Bank, you cannot unify, or you cannot unite, with your partner who lives in the West Bank, and this will be against the law of Israel. So again, as we can see here, another example of how they can continue dividing Palestinians by imposing or by enacting some laws, and they would say that you cannot say no to the law. This is the law, and we are organizing the society. So family unification law, and by the way, it was enacted in 2003 after the second Intifada. And I believe that this law was also enacted after many discussions in Israel about their concerns of the population growth. So they were worried that Palestinians had at that time until 2000 they had increase in the population, and Israel was concerned that Palestinians would continue having increase in the population. So they decided that one of the things that can prevent this growth in population is to impose or to enact a law of family or preventing family unification. So if you want to get married with someone from your own zone, from your own region, but don't get married with someone from another region like in the West Bank or Gaza. Okay, other laws also to continue thinking about laws and how laws are enacted or implemented to support those who are in power. I don't know if also any of you heard about people who live in Jerusalem, and I have some friends and I have some also family members, like my brother-in-law, so he's from Jerusalem. And because of the situation, because of the continuous problems and racism and discrimination there in Jerusalem, he found peace to live in Jordan with his wife, with my sister. So according to the Israeli law, in order for you to keep your rights, over your land and your house in Jerusalem, you shouldn't be away from Jerusalem for more than 3 years. So if you leave Jerusalem for more than 3 years, automatically you will lose your rights over your land and your house. So there are also many people, many Palestinians who live in Jerusalem, and because of this law, and we can think through critical race theory about how these laws are implemented and how Palestinians might be denied access to lands and houses because the Israeli government would tell them that you've been away for more than 3 years and you don't have the right to come back to Jerusalem and to live. And just automatically they give the land and the house to Israeli settlers. Another technique that I want to talk about, and I want to check the time. I think I'm fine with time. Another technique is the economic controlling people economically. And Jim, you spoke about labor power and how labor power is also used in Palestine and how they turn Palestinians into cheap labor, unfortunately, to benefit from them and to control them economically. So first of all, the Israeli government controls the market, the Israeli market. And from even before 1948, when Palestinian lands were taken to Israeli settlers, the majority of Palestinians, they became cheap labor, and because they wanted to work, they started working for the Israeli settlers, or the Israeli also newcomer at that time. So by the stealing or expropriation of lands, the Israeli government turned many Palestinians into cheap labor. And as I mentioned at the beginning also, considering the regions and the area where you are living, if you live in the West Bank, you might find more opportunities for you to work if you move to the north, where my family lives. Because Israel or Israeli companies, the majority of them, they are in the north. So for the people who live in the West Bank, in order for them to live and to live respectfully, they apply for a work permit for the Israeli government. They pay a lot for the work permit in order for them to go and work in Israeli companies. And usually they get very low salaries. So they turn them, they use their labor power, but this labor power is very cheap. Another way of controlling them through economy is also, as I mentioned before, controlling the population growth. So in a study that I conducted in Palestine to check the relationship between neoliberalism or economic changes and the Palestinian health and mental health, I noticed that there was a decline in the rate of population growth in Palestinian society after implementing neoliberal policies. So when life became so pricey for Palestinians, they started giving less and less birth because there were concerns about whether they will have, enough possibilities or chances to raise their children. So this was, although Israel would tell you that I did not do anything, I did not kill anyone, there's no genocide here, but this was an indirect way to control Palestinians and to control their population. So when life is so costly, when life is so pricey for Palestinians, they would avoid giving birth, so they might have one child, maximum two children, instead of having bigger families as they had to do before. And the last point that I wanted to mention about post-colonial techniques is education itself. As I started at the beginning, when I was trained to be therapist or psychologist, so the institution of counseling is controlled by the Israeli government. On one occasion, unfortunately, well, I say this, although I am aware of what's going on there, but there also the way of controlling professionals through the Israeli government. When once I remember on one occasion, one of my students in the high school was shot to death by an Israeli policeman an armed Israeli policeman, because the Israeli policeman said that this unarmed student threatened the policeman. So he was shot to death. The next day we went to the school, and you can imagine, I don't have to go into details about what the environment looked like at that time. And from the beginning, before I entered the school, somebody who was representative from the government, from the Israeli government, told me, Ahlam, your responsibility will be to release emotions only of the students, control them, don't talk about politics. Remember that your license might be taken if you talk about politics. So this wasn't a message that was told to me only, it was told also to many psychologists and therapists. And this was also another way to show you how education and therapy is controlled by those in power. And if we try to talk about politics, our license would be taken from us. Now, of course, you can't imagine what I did. If they wanted to do something indirect with me, I could also do something indirect with my students to raise their awareness and to talk about their well-being during this situation. Now, another thing that is related also to education, unfortunately, when the Israeli government also talks about peace, they also talk about what will happen after ending the war, and what curriculum will be there, what curriculum will be included in Gaza and in the West Bank. Now, this is not shocking to me, but I still see that you don't stop talking about education or curriculum that will be implemented in the West Bank or in Gaza. So it's not enough that the war stops, but what is important for the Israeli government, as we noticed from 1948 and continued in 1967 and today with Gaza, is that the Israeli government wants to also control the curriculum in Gaza to make sure that what they are teaching students in Gaza will be aligned with the Israeli policies and interests. Now, for conclusion, and of course, there are also many other tools, but again, considering the time, the reason I thought about talking about these techniques of controlling curriculum, education, professionals, using economy, turning people into cheap labor, all these things that are hidden from the media, and they are there in the daily life that can impact even the relationships, even romantic relationships between people. Some Palestinians, they didn't have the chance to get married, or they had to leave the region or the country in order for them to live together. So it's just an invitation for you and a reminder also for me, for myself, to think about what we mean by ceasefire and what we mean by peace. And when we say two-state solution, so what do we mean by state solution, and where we draw the line, and what we mean by ending occupation. Are we ending occupation by withdrawing the soldiers, or we should also think about the power and the techniques that continue to be there even after colonization, or what we see on the surface of colonization. Thank you so much.